Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you could hear me. Welcome to the celebration of life of Dr. Robert Gordon, Professor Emeritus, affectionately known as the Captain by some. Thank you for the beautiful harp music performed by Melinda Hart this morning. We'll hear more from Ms. Hart later in today's program. My name is Jay Solomon, and I have the honor of being your host this morning and to give some remarks. I also have been told that I have the honor of pointing out that there are washrooms available on either side of the entrance when you come in, so they're there if you need them. Today we have a program of distinguished speakers and music for you. At this time, I'd like to recognize members of Rob's family that are with us today. Rob's wife of 40 years, Linda Fletcher Gordon, organized this event and the lunch that is to follow. With her is their daughter Mia. From England today is Rob's daughter Claire and her husband Gary. Rob is predeceased by two sisters, Evelyn and Irene. Although Claire lives in England, Rob followed her life events with keen interest. He was proud when she graduated uni, as they call it in England. Claire is married, had two children, and is now the proud grandmother of two as well. Rob and Linda visited overseas. Sorry.
Zoe, Rob's niece is here too,
Oh.
from England.
I'm told that Rob's niece Zoe is also here from England. Thank you for being here. All right. And I'm told that Rob and Linda often visited their family in England and in France. And in later years, Rob was able to make significant visits to see his sisters and Claire. I have known Dr. Robert Gordon and his wife for the majority of my life now. Unbelievably, that 35 years have passed quite quickly. After graduating, speaking about myself, after graduating law school in 1986, I attended SFU Criminology Department as a graduate student. Over the next 2 years, Rob was influential in the direction of my master's thesis, and he encouraged me to work as a sessional instructor, which I did for a number of years. I presently work as a provincial court judge sitting in Surrey. So I do expect everyone to be on their best behavior today. I am making notes. During my time at SFU, Rob introduced me to his wife, Linda, and encouraged me to apply to join the board of the Lower Mainland Purpose Society that Linda had founded and was the executive director for many years. I was accepted to the board where I spent many years impressed and amazed with the work they did, and continue to do. This is a nonprofit society, and they provide a wide range of services to the community. My association with the Purpose Society has continued through my wife, Barry, who is a significant contributor to their programs. Anyone with the good fortune to have known Rob can attest to his affable manner, leadership skills, and his ability to go beyond theory and actually get things done. Rob tirelessly committed himself to the improvement and modernization of the School of Criminology and the greater SFU environment. As we all know, Rob was not shy from expressing his opinions, to say the least, on a variety of issues, and in particular on policing in this province. I'm sure we will be hearing more about his relationship with the media through our speakers today. Although Rob was a man with modern ideas, he also loved tradition. That included a celebration of accomplishments. In particular, some of you will know, he liked to dress up and carry the mace in the convocation procession here. He believed that accomplishments should be recognized and honored, and was proud of the role he played in providing opportunities to students and the opportunity to turn out critical thinkers, which is what this university is all about. Today, we'll recognize and honor Rob's many accomplishments. Rob had a career in policing, a career in academics, and a career in administration. He was successful in all his endeavors. Rob started a career towards policing when he was only 16 years old, joining the cadets in London, England. This led to being a constable at the age of 19. After London, he became a police officer in Hong Kong and then in Melbourne. Rob left policing for university in Melbourne and was fortunate to be told by a friend of a relatively new criminology department in Burnaby, British Columbia at SFU. This led to an application to the university and, as we know, a long and successful career here that was mutually beneficial. We also know that Rob truly loved his relationship with SFU. Rob received numerous accolades over the years. In 2013, he received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal, and in 2023, he was awarded the 2023 SFU Newsmaker Lifetime Achievement Award. Through his advocacy, he moved the needle towards rational social policy initiatives and responses, wary of bad policy based on reactions to aberrant and disturbing events. He took the long-term view of things. Word of Rob's passing led to an outpouring of tributes from colleagues and former students. Universally, Rob is described as a great scholar and commentator, down to earth and with a great sense of humor. He was also described as a man impressive in stature and demeanor. When the captain spoke, people listened. He had the air of a person who knew what he was talking about. However, he also had a mischievous smile and did not shy away from offering humorous critiques of administrators or ideas that did not meet his rigorous analytical standards, especially after consuming a certain measure of wine. One of his conspirators in this endeavor is his long-term friend, Joaquin, who will be offering us some remarks today. Folks who knew Robert, the academic, may not have recognized him if they visited the Purpose Society Bingo Hall on Columbia Street in the 1980s. The 80s was a time of austerity among funders, and the Purpose Society supported itself by holding these bingos. Rob loved to call bingo and make up all kinds of cutesy sayings when he called the numbers. He was a performer. He took over, and apparently the women loved him. Second to calling bingo, Rob was not shy to do anything that made bingo players happy. One Easter, he dressed himself up as the Easter Bunny, a huge Easter Bunny, and he really did hop around the bingo hall with his basket. Needless to say, the players loved it, loved him, and he was assisted Purpose in raising lots of money. Besides bingo, Rob spent his free time writing numerous articles and a book on guardianship. Rob loved hiking and boating. He owned a 27-foot Catalina sailing boat, and when Mia joined the family, he moved on to a 53-foot sailboat called the Sea Otter. The family spent untold hours on this boat, sailing up and down the coast. Rob and Linda did some serious hiking all over the world. They climbed Mount Meru as a warm-up to Kilimanjaro. They also hiked to Mount Everest Base Camp. They took spectacular vacations together to Thailand, China, and countries in Africa. Rob was also an avid scuba diver, with memorable trips to Egypt and the Cayman Islands. Rob was very proud of their daughter Mia, who is a skilled equestrian with natural ability for training horses, and not surprisingly, knows how to sail a boat. Rob encouraged these activities, although apparently he winced when required to pay for the upkeep of the horses. The price of love is sometimes steep, as we all know. Rob was actively involved in Mia's homeschooling between grades 3 and 9, and especially loved chemistry and biology experiments in the backyard. I'm sure Mia remembers those. Rob loved the joy on Mia's face when she learned something new. It also gave Rob, ever curious, an opportunity to research and learn about things that he did not have expertise in. I'm told that a drive past a Sikh temple led to a study of religions. After grade 9, Mia went to an equestrian academy. Mia presently works in social services. Unfortunately, over the last few years, Rob's health started to falter, although he preferred not to acknowledge this or accept any such thing. Apparently, he could be stubborn at times. Rob and family moved from New Westminster to an equestrian property in Abbotsford in 2001, just in time for an atmospheric event with a river running through their property. In any case, this had a significant impact on their well-being for a period of time. They lost lots of papers and photographs, and it was quite traumatic for the whole family. Fortunately, they were able to save their horses and eventually were able to repair the house and move back in. It took months to recover from this flooding. Rob, despite his faltering health, soldiered on as best he could and remained affable until the end. Rob has left a legacy that we can all recognize and honor today. Rob will be deeply missed by all who loved him. I would now like to invite Dr. John Watley to give some remarks. Dr. Watley has known Rob for a considerable time and share roots in England with him. Their relationship extended beyond colleagues and included dinners with Rob and Linda over time. And Dr. Watley.
Thank you very much. Jay Solomon, nice to meet you. This is rather long, and it's in text. Sometimes I'm going to falter doing it. I think I'll get through it all right. I've known Rob Gordon for about 24 years. From the time the SFU School of Criminology moved from the upper floor of the SFU library to the vacated French department offices on the first floor of West Mall West Mall Center, and long before the move to its current home in Saywell Hall. That's a long time, lots of movement there. Say then, I worked with Rob from the early 2000s in some highly interesting times and projects. I'd like to show you his part in some of the programs we worked on together, and then share a few anecdotes that might aid our understanding and help celebrate him at this sad time, although you've done a really good job of that too. Probably better than mine. Rob and I worked together on online programming in criminology and two related projects, the Masters in Applied Legal Studies and the development of a textbook press, SFU Publications, currently housed in the SFU Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. As I recall, at the time I first met him, he was the associate director or undergrad director of the School of Criminology at SFU. My memory is a little fuzzy. I'm not quite sure what he was back then. In my work with him, he was a model for the administrative magic required for new projects to be successful in a highly complicated academic environment. He was really good at it. One thing I noticed was that these projects consistently came from a set of values that helped those who needed it and sometimes righted wrongs. Over a number of intense faculty meetings in that Crim faculty discussion room in West Mall Center, he convinced the school to place major parts of the BA degree in criminology online. That was quite a radical step in that day. The program was successful and became more so during COVID. Students in policing, corrections, border security, and related professions could earn a BA in criminology through a mix of real-time and online coursework. Thus, keep their positions and income, and like students today, move ahead. I saw early that he had a persuasive technique, how should I say it, that shaped decisions by the other faculty members and got them to agree, and that very little energy was needed on his part for argument or resistance. As far as I could see, faculty saw the pragmatics of the vision and agreed. Likely why it was called, as you've recognized, the captain. After a year or so, we added another project, the Masters of Applied Legal Studies. This is a very interesting one. It, like the BA, was a hybrid of online and in-class modes, and the planning and admin for it began in about 2006. It reached out to all students interested in a general law degree, but focused on those wishing to become a notary public. Notaries in BC were then considered paraprofessional, not quite professionals. The new requirement of an MA clarified the tasks required of a notary It outlined an educative and ethical standard and the learning curve of a candidate that would allow notaries to be on par with many of the professions, including those in the law. In August of 2008, 23 students were accepted for the first cohort. On September the 4th of the same year, the program was launched at the SFU Surrey campus. BC is now one of the very few constituencies worldwide that require a master's degree to earn and use the notarial stamp. After 16 years, the MA-ALS yet graduates qualified students. It remains highly successful and is now securely in the hands of Professor Margaret Hall, the new captain. With her expert direction, it continues with strength, focus, and energy. SFU Publications was another of Rob's success stories. It's a textbook press. He sat on the review board for about 18 years and guided its decisions on publication of textbooks used by students at SFU and now in other post-secondary institutions. The board ensured high standards and a far reduced cost to undergraduates compared with textbooks purchased from the large commercial presses. Another project of Rob's, which you've mentioned, was the Elder Care Program. I did not participate in its research or its results, but he often mentioned it and we talked it over together. And I saw that it also remade and rebuilt a settled practice that clearly needed serious revision. Rob, along with many others in the field, recognized the deficit and the dangers of elder abuse in current institutions and helped make significant changes to them. After serious revisions in provincial elder law, oversight of the elderly became fairer, more pragmatic, and more protective than it had ever been. Rob's focus in these programs was clearly on disadvantaged, marginalized, or otherwise hidden groups that hover in gray zones of neglect. He was very good at finding them, and he was both a realist pragmatist and an idealist in improving them. During development of these programs, I got to know Rob and developed a strong friendship with him. I can't pretend to show all the programming in which he was active at SFU, but we connected, and most through those programs I've just shown. One reason for our connection was likely that we were both born in England, he in Potters Bar, Hertfordshire, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, correctly, myself in Exeter, Devonshire. I came over early at 11. Rob later, after a career in policing in the UK, Hong Kong, and Australia. I understand one part of his family owns a farm in Devon today. He looked forward to visiting it and loved going back occasionally and taking up that farming life. Now, I'm going to try something very dangerous here, so please give me a little slack. He was also able to mime a Devonshire farmer's dialect with more skill than Rob Brydon in the UK comedy series Would I Lie to You? I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's very, very funny. One of his favorite examples of Devonshire dialect was upon any successful outcome, he'd drop, "That's a proper job." I did not do that well. He had then a good ear for social dialects. As far as I could tell, it came from participating in the dialects of a working, very old, it goes back. The Devonshire farmers go back hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. That dialect is an old pre-Saxon dialect coming way back. And thus again, an understanding of hidden prejudices and so on. Close to his retirement, Rob's family moved to Abbotsford, as we know, and the small village of Arnold, where he and Linda and their daughter Mia raised horses on a small farm they purchased. A little different from his Devonshire roots, but they rebuilt it after the recent floods caused by the atmospheric river of 2020-21. I understand it's still being rebuilt, and it was a very massive damage caused by it. As before the farm became a possibility, he managed with Linda to live in and renovate their large Queen Anne home in New West that was once a doctor's residence, and thus close to membership in the elite of New West. As New West developed, its status dipped a little when it became a boarding home, and as I recall, was in deep need of renovation. He showed me one of their projects proudly. He and Linda have put in a whole backyard patio for that house. Brick, concrete, wood, seating, everything perfect and beautifully done. Very neat. And in addition, the whole of that ancient mansion inside and out was repainted and repaired by them. The painting done by Linda. Sorry, and others. Okay. Linda and I visited him a number of times, often for the graduate student party on New Year's Eve. Some of you might remember it. Those parties were highly entertaining and showed me the workings of the school in ways I could not have picked up in the classroom. Remember, I'm from English literature. I taught a course in criminology called Crime and Literature. Great course. Loved teaching it, but I didn't know much about criminology when I began. One thing I learned was that criminologists and their students have a highly developed sense of humor. I remember, for instance, that at midnight on New Year's Eve, after a magnificent meal for at least 30 of us, Rob and a number of his more agile guests would climb the stairs up to the attic and out to a tiny balcony up there, or a window, I can't remember which one, and with some sort of battery or air-driven horn, he would blow out a blast in the direction, I think, of south first, New West, and then he'd go around the circle, as I recall, and announce the new year. A perfect fit for his skills and leadership. He had a way about him, how shall I say, that both helped and challenged you. Rob also, as we've noted, had a two-masted schooner called the Sea Otter. It was actually a Hans Christian ketch, built, I understand, in the Philippines, with a teak deck and moored in Point Roberts. In younger days, Rob sailed in the English Channel, and perhaps that was the beginning of the captain epithet. Laurel and I were fortunate one summer to take a cruise with him and a number of crim faculty up Princess Inlet all the way to its end, and we talked about everything, including criminology, and I think with his family, as I recall, and we were shown the extraordinary scope and beauty of the BC coastal landscape and how to pilot and navigate that beautiful ship through and around it. One thing about such ownership, that schooner also required, as with his house and farm, a great deal of hard physical work. Every year the ship had to be lifted and the bottom scraped clean of barnacles and other growths, and the whole vessel repaired and cleaned. He did, I understand, most of it himself every winter, enough that it convinced me never to get a schooner. Over the years, we went out with him a number of times, and through him I increased my understanding of criminology and the BC coastline and Rob's values. I happened to have earned a private pilot's license very late in life, mostly because my wife drove me to it. And Rob often told me he wanted to fly with me around the BC coast. We'd never managed, however, to fly together, unfortunately. I cannot pay Rob back directly, but to close, I can imagine a flight with him. He, after all, managed most aeronautical maneuvers in his piloting of SFU criminology, so it would not have been much of a problem for him to handle a small light aircraft. Although I was thinking about this, I'm getting rather large in my old age. He was rather large too, getting us both in a Cessna 172. I don't know. The flight I'm imagining, however, would have been down Howe Sound, following the sea to sky past the Chief and over Squamish to Whistler, and would have been one more way for him to see Garibaldi and its lake, and the Tusk up close, and those peaks in the Tantalus range, and to be awestruck by those overwhelming rock walls, the ancient sharp blades of their summits and their valleys yet with snow in them. He would have recognized most of them, as he had hiked all over them many times, up and down their eastern reaches. It would have been good to do that flight with him, perhaps pay him back a little. Truth is, there's no direct payback for what Rob helped me do at SFU Crim and elsewhere. All I can hope for is that I have occasionally lived up to his model, and that the program and positive changes he initiated at SFU lasts. It has, and is going to go on for a nice long time. Rob was courageous, kind, pragmatic, firm in leadership, and an idealist, and he was a model of humanity for me. I'll miss him and his generosity. And again, thank you, Linda, for this opportunity to say these few words. I got to read a poem as well. Shall I do it now? Yes, I have to. It's a happier poem than that last ending. And it's by a gentleman called Bill Ingleton, who I've never met. It's called Robert Macaire Gordon in Memoriam, January 1st, 1947 to April 25th, 2024. He's a poet and novelist, and he's written a very good poem. This I know with abject certainty, whether it be tinkered turkeys or terrifying terrorists, domestic or foreign, the turkeys, the terrorists, or their duo in tandem, we kept in touch that way, this garrulous, gargantuan man. Academic, to be sure, from the street, not bamboozled by theoretical constructs, not washed in the unlived experience. The grin was always there, chunks of wisdom wrapped in mirth, hundreds, dare I say thousands, of appearances on local and national news broadcasts. Tweedy, sweatered, heavy with astuteness, sharing finely honed insights, sharply focused, bringing the sinister parsimony of criminal behavior into homes of news junkies, of which I am one. And while I watched, I basked in the personal, in the memory of good wine, good food, and the certainty, the parsing, the pragmatism, always salted with his good humor. I will miss the academic, the commentator, the distiller of criminal behavior, parsing the villainy that festers in the land, that needs, that demands vigilance. I will miss the friend, the sailor, the hiker, the hardiness of him. The things I am not were the means by which I could be live almost vicariously the pressures of blood, of food and film. I can hardly see this. Of identifying fools and fakers. These were shared, reveled in. One often misses the friend, but never the memory. Never the memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Watley. I would now like to call on Linda Hart, who is a professionally recognized harpist and teaches at the Celtic School of Music and Mozart School of Music, to perform a piece called The Captain HMS by Gilbert and Sullivan. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hart. I now have the pleasure of inviting Belle Purry to give some remarks. Belle Purry, as we all know, is a veteran award-winning journalist. In 2005, she was recognized with the British Columbia's Jack Webster Award for Outstanding Journalism. In 2022, she won the Canadian Screen Award for Best Local Journalist. But Ms. Purry.
Good morning, Linda and all of Rob's family. My heartfelt condolences. Rob was a gem. As reporters, we constantly draw on the authority of others, look for experts, people who can interpret the news for our audiences. And if I'm entirely honest with you, we're looking for people who can interpret the news for us so that we can explain it to our audiences. Rob was that expert. He could talk on a wide range of issues. He was, as we all would say, our go-to guy when we reported on crime or perhaps gang-related activities. He brought gravitas, thoughtful insight, and perspective to our stories. We respected him. That was very clear. He was a reporter's godsend, a hero of sorts, if you will. One of my colleagues told me that he thought of Rob as Moses-like. Atop that mountain, the beard, the gaze, the droll comments. And you'll love this one. Another one said, you know what, he was like Yoda. I was like, it's not that he looked like Yoda, but because he was wise and he was powerful. Rob was always willing to share his knowledge. We knew that he was someone that we could trust, someone who was neutral, but still had valuable and informative opinions. Over the past few weeks, since I had talked to Linda and heard the news, many of us reporters have been chatting about Rob, remembering him, sharing our Rob stories with one another. My colleague, Karen Larson, you may know her from her reporting, calls him a story saver. And she is so right. When everyone else would say no to interviews, and that always present, ominous deadline was looming, Rob would come through to bail you out. He was so generous with his time. It didn't matter. It could be any day, could be any weekend, it could be a holiday. Eric Rankin is a reporter, now retired from CBC, and he wanted me to share this story with you. There was a time, he says, there was one time where he was really desperate for an interview, and it was a holiday Monday, statutory holiday, probably in the middle of summer. So Eric made that call to Rob. And then with a camera in tow, Eric rushed out to meet Rob outside his home in New Westminster. Eric remembers, he says, Rob was ready. He'd thrown on a blazer on the top, but he kept the shorts and sandals from the waist down. The viewers had no idea. So I think it's safe to say that most reporters who've interviewed Rob at some point have a I was on Rob's front lawn story to share. And that emergency jacket probably got a lot of good use. Rob certainly knew his stuff. There's no doubt about that. But, he also made an effort to get to know us, the reporters who called him over and over and over again. That was noted and appreciated, but sadly, I think we never told him. Renee Filipponi is a managing editor now at CBC Vancouver. When she was a national reporter, she was posted overseas for a couple of years, and once that stint was over and she came back to British Columbia and got back into BC News, of course, that day came where she had to call Rob, and she still remembers his first question to her was, "When did you get back from London?" She had no idea that, he had this interest in our careers and kind of watched as we moved from one assignment to another. He very much valued his media colleagues. The relationships he built with journalists were clearly important to him. He knew that they were an effective way to share his research and his findings with a huge audience. He always encouraged dialogue. That's probably why we've been talking to him for so many decades. He was stalwart in guiding reporters through Vancouver's first Stanley Cup riot in 1994. In our newsroom at CBC, he came into the newsroom, sat with us in an edit bay, and together we reviewed all of the footage from that night. It was important for him to see what had happened before he shared his thoughts. And it was probably around that time, or not much later, when we were doing stories about cybercrime. And I remember one time he said, it won't be long. It's going to happen soon. Scammers are going to be able to reach into people's bank accounts. Right, sure, Rob. As if. And of course, we all know he absolutely was on the mark. One of my reporters, just to give you an indication of, how long we've been talking to him, she says to me, Rob was one of those go-to, always good for a great clip experts in my Rolodex. In her Rolodex. Not even sure a lot of people know what that is anymore. So that tells you how long, yes, that we've been calling Rob. Rob always had an opinion, often with a slight edge. He had a great sense of humor. He always had a twinkle in his eye. Consider some of the headlines that Rob generated. This is one of my favorite. The police are less organized than organized crime. That was Rob circa 2007. No friend of the RCMP, Rob again. And more recently on the Surrey policing debacle, quotes like, "This is why I've been yelling for the Solicitor General to step in and bring some order to this chaos." It's my understanding that Rob was still talking to the media, mostly about the Surrey policing station, right up to 2 weeks before he passed, and he still wasn't holding back on what he thought of it all. Rob talked street speak, not professor speak. He provided us with what we needed every time. So it's only fitting that he would win awards for that. A Newsmaker Award in 2007. And not long ago, right here, SFU's Newsmaker Lifetime Achievement Award for his extensive commentary on crime and policing over the years. Last year alone, SFU pitched his stories to news outlets on 14 different occasions. Now, that doesn't even look at the countless direct inquiries from journalists. And who knew that there's someone out there who keeps track of things like this? But Rob has apparently been mentioned in media stories more than 1,500 times. No wonder we often thought he was on TV more than us. Rob was a sought-after voice for all Canadian news outlets, for all the major Canadian news outlets. And I just can't say it enough. When reporters reached out to Rob, Rob was always quick to pick up the phone or return an email. which, by the way, he always closed off with a happy face emoji. Rob never was seeking the spotlight. He just wanted to help. He wanted to help reporters, and I imagine he wanted to help the crime-weary public. One of the last times that I needed his help, I emailed him, nothing happened. I texted him, and nothing happened. And then I telephoned, and I left a message. I mean, first of all, he didn't answer, and then I left him a message, and he didn't return my message. Never experienced that before. So, you know, you'd think I would clue in that maybe he was busy or something was going on. No, of course, I called again and again, and I might have just called again until he answered. And he answers with, "Belle, we're moving. I'm in a truck on the highway." There was a very long pause as I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? And, you know, just as any journalist would do, I just kind of took a deep breath and said, "Oh, okay, well, since I have you on the line anyway." Rob laughed and laughed, and then he answered my question, and like always, gave me the clip that I needed. So to Rob, where you are now, I hope there are no gangs. I hope there is no crime. And most importantly, I hope there are no reporters. Rest easy, my friend.
Thank you for those remarks, Belle. I would like to now introduce Dawn Embry, who probably needs no introduction. She has prepared a slideshow for us. She is a longtime employee of the Purpose Society. She has known Rob and Linda since she was a student herself at SFU. That was a few years ago, I understand. Not that anyone is counting how many. But that was around the time the Purpose Society was being set up in 1984. Dawn was the executive director of Purpose Society for about 10 years and now continues to contribute to Purpose in numerous ways. So, the slideshow.
Hi, I'm so glad everyone is here. Didn't think I was going to get teary. So, as Jay said, I met Rob in, I don't remember, it was either the fall semester of 1983 or the winter semester of 1984, when a friend of mine and I took his course on juvenile delinquency, which also tells you how long ago it was, because we don't use that language anymore, about 6 times over. During that class, Rob talked again about, Jay has mentioned or John mentioned, his wife who had started a nonprofit and was looking for volunteers. So a friend of mine and I duly headed down to the Purpose Society, and we started volunteering both in the day program and at bingo. That turned into a field placement, which I'm not sure whether Crim still has, but I did a field placement at Purpose, and then they offered me a job. And the rest is history. I think when people pass, a common thing is for us to, reflect on our own lives and the decisions and the choices we've made. And that's certainly the case for me. The bulk of my career stems back to taking that course on juvenile delinquency with Rob Gordon. I became very good friends with Rob and Linda. After that, spent more time than we can even count. As everyone has noticed or noted, Rob loved challenging conversations. One of the things I'm probably going to miss most was our sparring. Although I do think there were times when he felt a bit picked on or beat up on by Linda and I because we would gang up on him, but he needed that once in a while. I think we're going to move into the slideshow. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to pull some photos together, and I hope you're going to enjoy. So Irene, can you cut the lights, please?
Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know, and all the people that come and go stop and say hello. On the corner is a banker with a motor car. The little children laugh at him behind his back, and the banker never wears a mask in the pouring rain. Very strange. Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. There beneath the blue suburban skies I sit, and meanwhile back in Penny Lane there is a fireman with an hourglass, and in his pocket is a portrait of the Queen. He likes to keep his fire engine clean. It's a clean machine. Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. For a fish and finger pies in summer. Meanwhile, back behind the shelter in the middle of the roundabout, the pretty nurse is selling poppies from a tray. And though she feels as if she's in a play, she is anyway. In Penny Lane, the barber shaves another customer. We see the banker sitting waiting for a trim. And then the fireman rushes in from the pouring rain. Very strange. Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. There beneath the blue suburban skies I sit, and meanwhile back in Penny Lane is in my ears and in my eyes. There beneath the blue suburban skies, Penny Lane. Penny
We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Ever bonny boat was one as we sailed into the misty. Hark, now hear the sailors cry. Smell the sea and feel the sky. Let your soul and spirits fly into the misty. And when that foghorn blows, you know I will be coming home. And when that foghorn blows, Innocently we will float into the misty. And when that foghorn blows, I will be coming home. When that foghorn whistle blows, I've got to hear it. I don't have to fear it. I'm one to rock your gypsy soul, just like way back in the days of old. And together we will float into the misty. We were born before the wind, also younger than the sun. Everybody on board was one as we sail into the misty.
black holes in the sky. Shine on, you crazy diamond. You were caught in the crossbar, childhood and stardom, blown on a steel breeze. Come on, you target for faraway laughter. Come on, you stranger, you legend, you martyr, and shine. You reached for the secret too soon. You cried for the moon. Shine on, you crazy diamond. Threatened by shadows at night and exposed in the light. Shine on, you crazy diamond. Well, you wore out your welcome with random precision, rode on a steel breeze. Come on, you raver, you seer of visions. Come on, you painter, you piper, you prisoner, and shine.
So, the life and times of Robert Macaire Gordon. I don't know if people realized Rob's ashes are actually in the turtle that's on the table there, keeping the nautical theme. So, gonna miss you, Rob.
Thank you, Don. That was wonderful. Our last speaker today will be Rob's very good friend, Joaquin Ayala, who has been a family friend for over 30 years. I'm sure you'll hear how he and Rob hiked and sailed together, and that included the Stein Valley, and apparently shared a glass of wine or two together. So, without further ado, Mr. Joaquin.
I'm honored to have been asked by Linda to speak about Rob this afternoon. Rob and I spent hundreds of hours hiking the local mountains and often went on expeditions much further afield, disappearing into the backwoods and re-emerging days later, none the worse for wear and very thoroughly digitally detoxified. I can still hear his voice vividly, referring to me in the third person as that curious Spanish chap, or simply as the J-Man. First and foremost, Rob was an original. He was a larger-than-life personality, straight out of a Hemingway novel, who conquered anything he took on, whether academic or physical, through sheer force of will and bulldogged determination. He belonged to another age, another era, when Britannia still ruled the waves. Though sometimes at odds with our politically correct times, there was seldom any doubt regarding the right and proper course of action. I first met Rob through his wife, Linda, a city councillor at the time, who I knew through our mutual interest in preserving the architectural heritage of New Westminster. Linda invited me to their home for advice on some restoration work they were contemplating, and that's where I first encountered Rob, sitting behind stacks of paper at the kitchen table, tweed jacket, leather elbow patches, turtleneck sweater, teacup steaming in front of him. I introduced myself and said, "You must be Mr. Gordon." "My good fellow," he corrected, it's Dr. Gordon. And ever afterwards, he was always referred to as the doctor, which to me at least had a vaguely medical ring to it. To be certain, the doctor's prescriptions proved enormously beneficial, as they involved a great deal of strenuous hiking up mountainsides and paddling across lakes and rivers. It was certainly a potent antidote for depression, since melancholy is incompatible with soaring vistas, high-altitude, crystalline lakes, jagged mountain ranges stretching to infinity, and immersive cobalt blue skies filled with mystical Maxfield Parrish light. Also, if every muscle is aching, it's difficult to ruminate on the ephemeral kaleidoscope of absurdity which passed for municipal politics in Westminster at the time. Both Rob and I were tangentially involved with New West during a particularly turbulent period when the city's high priests were making questionable policy decisions. Rob was unavoidably embroiled in the madness through Linda's work on city council, and as we both had an enthusiasm for old house living, the demolition of century-old houses was a shared concern. In his worst moments, he referred to New Westminster as a gritty little mill town squatting on the banks of a polluted river. Though much more often, he was immensely grateful for the wonderful sense of community, close friends nearby, and the uniqueness of our neighborhood compared to the many modern and sterile communities in the Lower Mainland. We shared a common cause in attempting to make the world, at least our corner of it, a better place. I recall one unseasonably cold day in October, which we spent putting up municipal election signs for Linda throughout the city. This involved stacking piles of signs in the back of a pickup truck and driving around to people's homes, jumping out and hammering a wooden stake into their frozen lawns. To keep up with our spirits, we took turns with one-liners. I might proudly announce, "This proves I'm fluent in sign language," or, "If there is a God, then give me a sign." And he would say, "Putting up election signs is rather like working at a prison library. It has its pros and cons." Or, "The toilets in the New Westminster Police Department have been stolen. The police apparently have nothing to go on." Soon after, we realized we had several signs left over, and since we were tired of getting permission, we started a guerrilla campaign and liberally pounded signs around random boulevards and intersections, including on the other side of the bridge in Surrey coming into New Westminster, and similarly on boulevards in Burnaby, reasoning that New West residents were more likely to notice our signs on major thoroughfares versus residential side streets, even if they were technically in the wrong city. One time, we both coincidentally had some business to attend to in Victoria, so we carpooled and took BC ferries. Days before, I had just purchased my first sailboat, and as Rob was a very experienced sailor and knew all about the arcane language of wind, tides, and currents, the conversation naturally centered around how winds coming from random directions could be harnessed to provide forward motion. He pulled out a used manila envelope from his briefcase and proceeded to draw a compass rose on the back and illustrated how the sails of a ship needed to be set depending on each wind direction. To this day, I have that manila envelope framed in my office. I drilled down by asking so many microscopic and detailed questions that uncharacteristically, he had trouble explaining it all, and it became apparent to both of us that he had internalized the knowledge of sail trimming to such a visceral level that it was impossible to put into words. The closest way of describing his approach to the art of sail trimming was akin to Obi-Wan Kenobi counseling Luke Skywalker to use the Force. In other words, just feel the wind on your body and trim accordingly. Inevitably, of course, much good-hearted ribbing ensued regarding my early adventures or misadventures and unflattering comparisons to the Spanish Armada. You won't talk about that. Over the course of all those years, we went on many outdoor adventures, and his enthusiasm for bagging a peak or spending days walking along the ridge of some remote mountain range in some far-flung corner of the province was infectious. Everything was planned using topographic maps in those days, since some of the trails were barely trails, mostly just rock cairns as we were well above the tree line, and consumer-grade GPS was still in its infancy. Navigation was done using compasses, dead reckoning, and sometimes sheer luck. However, we rarely, if ever, got lost, and despite all the hundreds of kilometers we covered in the backcountry, we never had an incident that in any way could be considered dangerous, despite encountering bears, snakes, hornets, and mosquitoes. During one particularly epic multi-day excursion of the Stein Traverse, very remote, we were passed by a troop of German Boy Scouts decked out in full Tyrolean uniforms. Many years later, we weren't sure if that even really happened, or we had just dreamed it. It was so strange. Like everything, Rob's style of hiking was idiosyncratic. Though he owned a conventional camping stove, his preference was always to build a fire when setting up camp. I was an early adopter of the ultralight movement and preferred a more minimalist approach to hiking. Rob preferred tried and true Army surplus gear, old school. And I recall on one multi-day hike, to my astonishment, he pulled out an axe to chop up some deadfall for kindling. On another occasion, I saw him pull out a large red apple from his backpack several days into a long hike, while the rest of us were carefully reconstituting our dehydrated rations in our featherweight titanium pots. Now, one of the non-negotiable rules of hiking with Rob was that no matter the circumstance, be it blizzard, hurricane, or even imminent bear attack, everything stopped at tea time. And nothing was too dire that couldn't be handled better and with greater aplomb after a good brew-up. The first time I asked why we were stopping, he was somewhat taken aback, as if the answer was beyond obvious. "My dear fellow, it's tea time. We're not savages, you know." One winter's day, we decided to go for a long walk instead of hiking up a mountain. We went out to Boundary Bay to enjoy the sea breezes, and as the appointed hour approached, we looked around for a place to set up. As chance would have it, we were just a few hundred feet from the US border, and Rob developed a sudden craving. An essential ingredient was missing, which could easily be acquired just a few steps away. Sadly, those few steps involved crossing an international border, and neither of us had bought our passports. Regardless, there was a fence which had a loose section which you could easily shimmy through, and such was the level of border security in those pre-9/11 halcyon days that by barely breaking our walking pace, we entered the US. We walked down to a general store, Rob disappeared inside, and soon emerged with an enormous black bag of Bassett's licorice all sorts, which we proceeded to devour along with tea and biscuits. And so, with blackened teeth and after being fully hydrated, we again broke several international laws and returned to the Great White North. Besides hiking, Rob was an avid canoeist, as was I. We managed to get someone to drive us and our 2 canoes to Hope once, where Rob and I put in with a plan of an overnight trip paddling down the Fraser River to New Westminster. For this trip, being as weight was no longer a factor and everything was floating downstream with us, we outdid each other in terms of what we brought along to eat. We paddled all day and just before sunset made camp on the shores of a wooded island in the middle of the river just past Desroches. I took a large double burner stove, a Chinese wok, and a cooler full of vegetables and noodles. I was going through a vegetarian phase at the time. Rob outdid me by bringing a cooler which included a bottle of red wine with the appropriate glass stemware, a frozen steak, and a baked potato wrapped in foil with a cast iron pan to cook everything over an open fire. Despite our differing dietary preferences, we got along splendidly, and as usual, our conversations ranged from the ridiculous to the surreal. We both knew the entire Monty Python canon by heart, so we talked and laughed late into the night. It was during these far-ranging talks that I learned about Gordonism, the world according to Rob's unique cosmology. I could always tell when he was about to make a pronouncement from on high because he would arch his eyebrow and stroke his beard, and his baritone voice deepened. As far as criminality was concerned, and for years he'd been a policeman and thus spoke from direct experience as well as academic authority, he often said, "We only catch the really stupid ones." Politics, especially at the municipal level, and particularly in New Westminster, ultimately boil down to just 2 things. In the end, it's really just about sewers and rubbish. With regards to both hiking and life, he believed no matter how far down the wrong path you have traveled, turn around. And finally, a favorite Python quote of his, which pretty much summed up everything. The universe itself keeps on expanding and expanding in all of the directions it can whiz, as fast as it can go, at the speed of light, 12 million miles a minute, and that's the fastest speed there is. So remember when you're feeling very small and insecure, how amazingly unlikely is your birth. And pray that there's intelligent life somewhere out in space, because there is bugger all down here on Earth. Without a doubt, my life and the lives of those who were fortunate enough to have called him a friend were vastly improved by the very good fortune of having known him. The mountains will never be quite the same without his humor and boundless enthusiasm. I continue to hike, and wherever I am in my travels, to this day, I always make it a habit to stop and brew a cup of tea and take the time to appreciate my surroundings. I'd like to think that those hikes were some of the happiest days of our lives. He will be very greatly missed. Thank you for listening.
Well, that concludes our speakers for today. Thank you for all attending. We will now, oh, does Linda want to say a few things? She does. That wasn't on the agenda.
No, I am never on the agenda, ever. I wasn't going to speak, but I have to. I'm going to find the words, just a moment. I want to thank first all of you for coming. It's just so kind, so caring, so generous of your time to come here and honor Rob, and it means so much to me. I want to thank Rob's family, Zoe, his daughter Claire, and Gary for hours of on the plane, and I know what flying is like these days, and just thank you for coming and being here with me. Thank you, Mia. And thank you to all the speakers today. One of the things that has been hard is that there has been a hard few months, and when you're in the midst of something, you don't have that long-term, or I didn't have that long-term perspective. And Dawn putting together the slideshow and having me, go through pictures and everything, it really, really was a good therapeutic exercise because I got to put my life in a context. All the years, all the things, all the amazing things we've done, the amazing friends, and to a period of life that was really very short compared to the whole thing. And so thank you, Dawn, for doing the slideshow and helping me get through and reframe and feel so good today. People say, well, you're looking good. Well, I feel good because I'm surrounded by people who care about me, about Rob, and all of you now. You're, his SFU family for the most part. So just thank you.
Anyone else? If anyone else wants to say a few remarks, you can. We do have time before lunch. Anyone want to come forward and say a few things? All right. Well, if not, we... Oh, okay. There'll be a mic at the... I'm not sure if you can hear that, though, but there will be a microphone at the lunch if you want to say a few things or share a few memories with us. So the lunch will take place at the Diamond Alumni Center, which is close by, apparently. Hopefully we can all find it. Thank you for attending today.